Hello, family. Enjoy this relaxing moment with Surly Tales. Remember to hit the like button, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. It means the world to us. Also, share this video with your friends and loved ones, and turn on post notifications so you don't miss future videos from us. Thank you as you do so. Sit back and relax as we dive into the story. Lena Rivera paused in front of the tall hallway mirror, her reflection partly hidden by the bucket and broom she carried. The early morning sun, spilling through stained glass windows, lit the marble floors of the Hawthorne mansion in shifting hues of gold and blue. It was a breathtaking view, if one had the freedom to stop and admire it. Yet for Lena, these corridors were not sites of leisure. They were her workspace, an endless list of chores to be completed before the household woke. At 20 years old, Lena had already been working at the mansion for nearly 2 years. She was known among the staff for her polite demeanor and quiet efficiency. Uniform crisp, hair neatly pulled back, she glided through each day in near invisibility. And that suited most members of the Hawthorne family just fine. Especially Juliet Hawthorne, the sole heiress, whose glance grazed Lena only when giving orders or dismissals. What no one else saw was the small pocket notebook Lena kept tucked into her apron, filled with scribbled musical notes and lyrics. Each night, after the household retired, Lena retreated to the grand music room, a lavish space the Hawthornes rarely used, as they favored more modern forms of entertainment. There, under the faint glow of a single lamp, Lena would sing. Her voice, painstakingly trained by her late mother, rose and fell like a lullaby for the vacant chairs and silent piano. It was in these hushed hours that she felt most alive, most true to herself. Lena's mother had been an opera singer of modest renown, performing in small theaters across the region until illness stripped her of both career and, eventually, life. On her deathbed, she had pressed her daughter's hands between her own and whispered, "Never bury your voice." Lena carried that promise like a candle in a dark corridor, shielding it from every draft of despair. She never told anyone at the Hawthorne mansion about her talent. It seemed safer that way. On this particular morning, the hush in the halls felt heavier. Lena sensed a strange current in the air, though she couldn't name its source. She finished dusting an ornate vase, its porcelain painted with scenes of a bygone era, then tiptoed into the solarium to water the exotic plants. The solarium's glass walls overlooked gardens ablaze with roses. From behind a column, she caught a glimpse of Juliet, dressed in a silk robe, sipping an espresso. Juliet Hawthorne was, in many ways, the mansion's focal point. Tall, slender, and impossibly poised, she radiated a self-assuredness that both intimidated and fascinated everyone around her. She'd recently returned from an audition at the prestigious Metro City Talent Show, a fact that the entire household had heard about through her frequent complaints. While Lena didn't know the precise details, rumors abounded that Juliet's audition had been rejected, tarnishing her carefully crafted self-image as a future star. Trying to stay unnoticed, Lena inched toward the hanging ferns, hoping to water them quietly. But Juliet's voice sliced through the morning stillness. "You there, girl?" Lena froze. "Yes, Miss Hawthorne?" Juliet set down her espresso, her eyes flicking to Lena's apron. "Make sure the music room is spotless today." She paused as though picking her words carefully. "I'm expecting company there this evening." Lena bowed her head. "Yes, Miss Hawthorne." She turned to go, but Juliet's tone softened unexpectedly. "You know, I've heard rumors that you sing sometimes." A subtle arch of her brow hinted at curiosity. Lena's heart lurched. Who could have told her? Had she been overheard on one of her midnight visits to the music room? I don't know where those rumors came from," she managed, trying not to let her cheeks burn. Juliet merely shrugged. "People talk," she said dismissively. "Anyway, run along. There's a scuff on the marble near the east wing. Take care of that." And with that, she lifted her espresso cup once more, as though the conversation had never occurred. Lena retreated, pulse thrumming. She silently vowed to be more cautious. But later that night, when the house fell quiet, she couldn't resist the call of the music room. Its parquet floors glimmered faintly in the moonlight, and the grand piano's lid stood half open, as though inviting her. She set down a small lamp by the piano bench, her reflection shimmering in the instrument's glossy surface. For a moment she hesitated, recalling Juliet's words, "I've heard rumors that you sing." Had she been followed? Was she really safe to sing now? Steeling herself, Lena opened her notebook. The lines of music her mother had once taught her seemed to dance on the page. She began softly, testing the acoustics. The notes floated through the wide chamber, curling around the silent instruments like affectionate ghosts. As her confidence grew, her volume swelled. Each note felt like a liberation, a testament to the promise she had once made to her mother. Unbeknownst to Lena, a shadow lingered outside the door, silent and still. Juliet, robes brushing the floor, stood listening with narrowed eyes. She pressed herself against the wall, spine rigid, unable to believe the clarity and richness of Lena's voice. That sound carried a depth of emotion, raw, unpolished in some places but stunning nonetheless. The jealousy that twisted through her was instant and fierce. This was not the meek little maid she took for granted. This was a threat. A reminder of her own humiliation at the talent show. If a maid could outshine her, how could she ever reclaim her pride? When the song finished, Juliet slipped back down the hallway, mind racing. Yes, Lena had a captivating voice, but that could be turned to her advantage. People loved a spectacle, even a cruel one. She thought of her social media friends, especially those with massive followings who delighted in mocking others. A plan took shape in her mind, fueled by the sting of her own failed audition. If the city's biggest talent competition had refused Juliet, perhaps she could still appear, by proxy. And if that proxy happened to crash and burn in front of a judging panel, well, that was a spectacle guaranteed to go viral. Up in the music room, Lena tucked her notebook away, unaware of the seeds just planted in Juliet's mind. She whispered her mother's name, a small prayer to the woman who believed in her unconditionally. For now, the only applause she would ever expect lay in the echo of her own notes against polished walls. Her reflection lingered in the piano's glossy finish, a quiet maid with a hidden gift, oblivious to the storm about to unfold. Unseen, the mansion's mirrors bore witness to them both. The maid who longed to sing freely, and the heiress whose secret plan would soon set them on a collision course neither could predict. Juliet Hawthorne stood in her lavish dressing room, glaring at her own reflection in the mirror. It was early afternoon, and rays of sunlight illuminated rows of designer shoes, velvet drapes, and a chandelier that scattered rainbows on the polished floor. Yet all her expensive surroundings felt worthless compared to the humiliation she still nursed. She had worked for months to secure an audition at Metro City Talent Show, only to be rejected in the preliminary rounds. Juliet had assumed her family name, stunning looks, and choreographed routine would guarantee success, but the judges had been unmoved. One had even called her performance unoriginal. Now there was Lena Rivera, a maid, a nobody, with a voice that had nearly made Juliet's heart stop. No matter how she tried to rationalize it, she couldn't deny the raw power she'd overheard in the mansion's music room. Lena, naive and unseen, possessed a gift Juliet envied. What if Lena had auditioned instead of her? Would the judges have praised her? The thought soured her mood further. A soft knock broke her reverie. She cleared her throat. Enter. Her personal assistant for the day, a young woman named Clarissa, stepped in, holding a tablet. Miss Hawthorne, here are the influencer RSVPs for this weekend's house party. Also, you mentioned you wanted an update on the city's next big talent show. Correct, Juliet said, gesturing for Clarissa to continue. Clarissa swiped her screen. The upcoming round is scheduled in a month. There's a special slot for late additions, apparently a wild card category that can give newcomers a shot at a large audience. Juliet's lips curved into a slow smile. This was exactly what she'd been waiting for. Perfect. Make a note to reserve a spot for someone I'm sponsoring. Clarissa blinked. Sponsoring Miss Hawthorne? You'll see. Juliet waved her off. That will be all. The assistant left, and Juliet's grin spread. If she couldn't dazzle the crowd herself, she could certainly orchestrate a spectacle. Her mind churned with possibilities. She would sweet-talk Lena into auditioning, only to ensure the performance was as disastrous as possible. Lena was too shy to question the invitation. She'd probably consider it a dream come true. Juliet imagined the cameras rolling, capturing every flubbed note and awkward pause. The public would devour it, and all eyes would be on Juliet's social circle for pulling the strings. But first, she needed to set the trap. Downstairs, Lena stood at the base of a grand staircase, balancing a feather duster and a bundle of freshly laundered towels. She couldn't shake the memory of the previous night. She had the nagging feeling someone had been listening during her secret practice, but she hadn't spotted anyone. Still, her intuition told her that the mansion's atmosphere had changed. "Lena, there you are." Juliet's voice rang out, bright and cheerful, an unsettling contrast to its usual chill. Startled, Lena nearly dropped her towels. She spun around to see Juliet descending the staircase with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Miss Hawthorne," she stammered, stepping aside politely. "Is something the matter?" "Not at all," Juliet replied, waving away the concern. "Actually, I was hoping to chat with you. I heard a rumor, one that you have some talent. Singing, specifically." Her gaze flicked from Lena's face to the feather duster in her hand, as though making some silent joke. Heat rushed to Lena's cheeks. It's nothing really. Just a hobby. I don't sing for anyone. I'm sure you." Juliet cut in, tone sweetly conspiratorial. "Oh, don't be so modest. I've heard you late at night. You have a lovely voice." She let the compliment hang, savoring Lena's wide-eyed surprise. "And I have an idea that might interest you. You see, I happen to know someone who can secure an audition slot at the next big talent show in the city. I was thinking, well, maybe it's time your voice was heard." Lena's heart hammered. She hugged the towels closer as though they might shield her from the conversation. "Me? A talent show? I couldn't. I'm just a maid, Miss Hawthorne." Juliet leaned forward, lowering her voice into a gentle hush. "Don't say that. You have a gift. Why hide it? Don't you want to see how far it can take you?" She placed a light hand on Lena's arm. "Trust me, I know the right people. If you're willing, I can help." Torn between wariness and longing, Lena thought of her mother's last words, "Never bury your voice." It was as if fate dangled an unexpected chance. I wouldn't know where to begin," she whispered. Juliet beamed. "Leave that to me. We'll find you something to wear, help you pick a song. Perhaps even get you a short practice slot with my own vocal coach." She spoke quickly, painting a supportive, glamorous picture. "All you have to do is say yes." For a breath, Lena stood speechless. She had never been offered such an opportunity, never thought anyone in this mansion cared about her goals. Her usual reality was dusting statues and polishing floors while dreaming of a spotlight she believed was unreachable. "Yes," she finally said, voice trembling. "Yes, I'd be grateful." Juliet squeezed her arm. "Wonderful. We'll make all the arrangements." The moment Lena walked away, her head spun with excitement and doubt, as though she were living someone else's life. She clutched the towels so hard her knuckles whitened. Could this be real? Or was it too good to be true? That evening, in her small attic room, Lena balanced on the edge of her narrow bed. Excitement lit her eyes, but a hint of worry tugged at her thoughts. She had overheard bits of gossip from the other staff. Apparently, Juliet was telling people that the mansion's maid would soon grace the stage of a major competition. Some snickered at the idea of a maid-turned-diva. Others shrugged, certain it was just a passing whim of Juliet's. Yet Lena tried to focus on the positive. She used her phone's limited data plan to research the talent show, reading about past winners, everyday dreamers who became overnight successes. She imagined stepping onto that stage with a microphone, singing as she did in the lonely music room, only this time for a real audience. A shiver of possibility coursed through her. Down the hall, Juliet retreated to her private suite, phone in hand, drafting messages to her influencer friends. "Wait until you see this," one text read. "The maid thinks she's a star, going to be hilarious." She attached a winking emoji, then fired off more texts detailing the upcoming event, ensuring that key gossip channels would be primed to watch Lena crash and burn. In the back of her mind, Juliet relished the thought of cameras capturing every mortifying second. This wasn't about Lena's triumph, it was about Juliet reasserting control after her own painful rejection. At midnight, Lena once again slipped into the music room, carefully switching on the lamp beside the piano. She stood, notebook in hand, with a new sense of purpose. If she was truly going to audition, she needed to practice in earnest. She owed it to her mother's memory to make the most of this incredible chance. Her voice felt steadier tonight, fueled by hope rather than secrecy. Notes flowed cleanly, resonating against gilded walls. Outside the door, no shadow lurked this time. Juliet didn't need to spy any further, she had all the confirmation she needed. The plan was set. The maid would have her moment on stage, only to realize too late that she was the butt of a grand joke. Back upstairs, Lena finished her practice and closed the music room door with trembling hands. She didn't see the malicious grin Juliet wore earlier, nor the texts that had already begun circulating about her impending spectacle. Instead, Lena carried a small spark in her heart, a spark ignited by the dream that perhaps, just perhaps, her mother's wish would finally come true. Her voice, once hidden, might be heard by the world. A low hum of excitement thrummed through the stadium's backstage corridors, punctuated by bursts of laughter and frantic calls for "Next act, on deck." Lena Rivera hovered by a rack of shimmering costumes, her heart pounding as she watched established performers breeze by in clouds of perfume and confidence. She clutched the modest garment Juliet had given her, a plain, ill-fitting dress that felt more like a costume for mockery than a stage debut. Yet she smoothed its wrinkles nervously, a small act of determination. She would not let her fears devour her. For weeks, she had rehearsed every spare moment in the Hawthorne mansion's music room, carefully selecting a song that would showcase her full vocal range. Though an undercurrent of anxiety buzzed in her thoughts, particularly about Juliet's sometimes cryptic, sometimes sugary encouragement, she forced herself to believe this night could be life-changing. Her mother's words echoed each time worry crept in, "Never bury your voice." In the cramped backstage area, fluorescent lights gleamed off scuffed floors as stagehands bustled around. Other contestants paced and muttered lines under their breath, some in extravagant costumes, some with guitars slung over their shoulders, each hoping to leave their mark. Lena felt like an intruder among them, a maid who'd somehow drifted into a realm of spotlights and applause. Nearby, Juliet Hawthorne was the picture of elegance, leaning against a pillar in a sleek designer outfit. Her phone camera hovered in front of her like a vulture awaiting a carcass. Now and then she lifted it to record short clips for her influencer friends, ensuring they'd have front-row access to the spectacle she believed was about to unfold. Every so often, she tossed Lena a saccharine smile that made Lena's stomach lurch. "Are you ready?" Juliet asked with feigned concern, stepping closer. Lena swallowed hard. "I think so," she managed. Juliet patted her shoulder, nails painted a sharp red. "Don't overthink it. Just sing," she said, her voice dripping with a strange mix of encouragement and condescension. "I'll be in the front row, cheering you on." From the corner of her eye, Lena noticed Tori, one of Juliet's influencer friends. Tori aimed her phone at them, broadcasting a live feed to thousands of followers, the chat window buzzing with snide remarks about the clueless maid who thinks she can sing. Lena forced herself not to look, reminding herself that she had endured scorn before, and she had still practiced, still persevered. Just then, a voice boomed over the stage intercom, "Next performer, please be ready. We'll call you in 3 minutes." Lena's breath caught in her throat. She clutched the microphone, her palms slick with sweat. 3 minutes until the biggest moment of her life. 3 minutes to gather every ounce of courage she had. A tall, svelte stage manager wearing a headset appeared at her side. "You're Lena Rivera, right? Follow me." She nodded, heart fluttering, and trailed him down a hallway lined with framed posters of past winners, smiling faces immortalized in glossy prints. She whispered a silent prayer that she wouldn't become the butt of a joke for years to come. Behind the curtain, the stage manager led her to the wings, where the hush was electric. Through a small gap in the velvet curtain, Lena glimpsed an immense audience. Countless faces merged into a single living creature, phones raised, lights flickering. She felt the energy of the crowd in her bones. On stage, a group of acrobatic dancers finished their routine to polite applause. The MC, a charismatic man in a sparkly suit, bounded forward with a megawatt grin. "Ladies and gentlemen, that was the Starlight Troupe. Next, we have a rather unexpected participant, Miss Lena Rivera, making her first stage appearance." A smattering of intrigued claps, a few scattered laughs. The dancers exited, exchanging quick high fives. One of them brushed past Lena and smiled encouragingly. "Break a leg," he whispered. She took a step forward, nearly stumbling over her ill-fitted dress. The stage lights blinded her for a second, a glaring contrast to the relative dimness backstage. She swallowed a spike of panic as she walked into the center of the stage, microphone in hand. Rows upon rows of spectators stretched out, the front row occupied by a small group that included Juliet. Phones were raised, presumably to capture the funniest flop of the night, as some had already dubbed it on social media. A trickle of laughter floated up from the seats, mild but perceptible. The music begins. An accompanying track started, a soft, orchestral piece Lena had rehearsed meticulously. She raised the microphone, trying to steady her trembling hands. Her gaze flicked to a tall man filming her with a sneer on his lips, then to Tori, streaming live. A pit opened in her stomach, threatening to swallow her. "Just sing," she told herself. For a moment, she inhaled, letting her mother's memory fill her with warmth. The first note emerged, delicate yet clear, cutting through the pockets of casual chatter. The hush grew as people realized, slowly, that what they expected might not match reality. Lena continued to the next line, her confidence easing in bit by bit. But just as she found her footing, one of Juliet's friends stood up in mock applause, clapping slowly and sarcastically. "This is gonna be good," he called out, triggering ripples of mean laughter. Phones flashed, capturing the moment. The intruding laughter cut Lena's note short, and for a heart-stopping second, she feared she would choke on stage. Her vision blurred with unspilled tears, the hateful smirks in the front row fueling her shame. Some audience members joined in, uncertain of what was happening but always ready to be amused at someone else's expense. Her mind screamed at her to run. But then a voice, a single, encouraging voice from somewhere in the mid-rows, shouted, "Keep going." It rang above the mockery, a lifeline of empathy. Lena shut her eyes, letting the swirl of laughter fade. "Focus on the music," she reminded herself. She lifted the microphone again, pouring her next note with all the emotion she'd bottled up in lonely nights. The melody soared, carrying heartbreak, hope, and resilience. Gradually, an amazed hush began to blanket the crowd. Even Tori, who had been snickering, lowered her phone a fraction, eyes widening in surprise, turning laughter into silence. As Lena's voice filled the theater, more and more phones stilled, now recording a startling display of talent rather than a comedic failure. The notes rose higher, golden in their clarity. People who had come expecting an epic flop found themselves spellbound by a voice that glimmered with raw sincerity. Even stagehands in the wings stopped working to watch, some leaning on props or bits of equipment, their mouths parted in awe. Juliet's mocking smile froze. She stared at Lena, her expression a collision of disbelief and anger. The humiliating meltdown she had carefully staged was unraveling under the force of genuine skill. Next to her, her influencer friends exchanged uncertain glances, not sure how to spin the narrative they'd been promised. Lena reached the climax of the song, a long, sustained note that showcased the opera training she'd gleaned from her mother's old lessons. She held it bravely, channeling every disappointment, every lonely evening, every secret hope. For a moment, the entire auditorium seemed to hold its breath. When she finally let the note fade, silence rushed in like a tidal wave. No one laughed now. Someone in the back rose to their feet, clapping, and that single applause ignited the entire theater. The noise swelled to a roar, an ovation that shook Lena to her core. It was the first time she'd felt so undeniably seen. Tears pricked her eyes. She lowered the microphone, dazed by the response. A judge in the front row, someone famous for his caustic critiques, stood up and clapped, a stunned grin on his face. Juliet, however, remained seated, arms folded, her fury poorly disguised by an expression of forced calm. Lena stumbled off stage, heart hammering in her chest. Adrenaline still coursed through her, making her hands tremble. Before she could process what had happened, a small flurry of producers and social media personalities rushed up. Cameras flashed. Microphones were shoved her way. "How long have you been singing? Where did you train? Is it true you're a maid?" She opened her mouth but couldn't form a coherent sentence. Overwhelmed, she mumbled polite apologies and slipped further backstage, seeking a quiet corner. Hiding behind a stack of equipment crates, she finally let a sob escape. The sound was a tangled knot of relief, disbelief, and the aftershock of raw emotional energy. She pressed a hand to her mouth, remembering the audience's cheers. That hadn't been pity applause, it was genuine. A wave of gratitude for that single voice who had shouted, "Keep going," washed over her. In that moment, she realized she wasn't alone. Juliet's rage. Meanwhile, Juliet lingered in the lobby, seething. The show's organizers passed by, gushing about the underdog who stunned everyone. Her phone buzzed with notifications, messages from her influencer friends demanding to know how the maid had soared instead of crashing. A scowl etched her perfect features. She typed a furious text. This was not supposed to happen. She ruined everything. But no amount of rewriting the narrative could deny the fact that Lena had turned a would-be laughingstock into a star-making performance. Attendees were posting clips of her final note on social media, their captions shifting from ridicule to admiration. Quite resolve. Eventually, Lena emerged from her hiding spot. The stadium had quieted now that other acts were performing. She realized, with a tremor of shock, that she might have changed her life tonight. Or at least opened a door she hadn't dared approach. In a dimly lit backstage hallway, she bumped into the stage manager. He paused, looking at her kindly. "You did great, kid," he said. "A lot of folks come here hoping to impress the crowd. But you just sang from the heart. Don't lose that." She managed a small smile. "Thank you," she whispered. A moment later, she spotted Juliet near an exit, her expression dark. Lena's stomach flipped. There would be consequences, she was sure. Yet she recalled the thunderous applause and realized she couldn't regret speaking her truth through song. Head held high, she slipped into the cool night air. Reporters and fans still buzzed around the building's entrance, some scanning the crowd for her. She pulled her plain coat tighter, wanting a moment of solitude. Under a street lamp, she lifted her phone to see dozens of messages, some from unknown numbers praising her, a few missed calls from potential music influencers, and texts from staff at the Hawthorne mansion who'd seen the live stream. They wanted her to shatter. Yes, Juliet had orchestrated the moment for Lena to crack, to provide comedic fodder for social media. But laughter had died in silence the instant Lena's voice took flight. Now that the show was over, she realized something else. Once you confront the crowd, once you survive the storm of mockery, you're no longer the same person you were before. Taking a trembling breath, Lena set her phone aside. Under the starlit sky, she allowed a small smile. She had survived the night of laughter, and in doing so, discovered an inner strength she never knew she had. They had come to laugh at her, but she'd given them a reason to listen. And for the first time in her life, she allowed herself to wonder, if I could do this, what else might I achieve? Lena Rivera hardly slept the night after the talent show. Every time she closed her eyes, she could still feel the stage lights burning into her vision, see the shocked faces of the audience as her voice rose above their mocking jeers. She replayed that final note over and over, how it seemed to cut through the stadium air and hush every whisper into breathless awe. Even hours later, her body still hummed with the memory of adrenaline. She awoke at dawn to a phone buzzing incessantly on her bedside table. Dressed in the same rumpled attire she'd worn home, Lena fumbled for the device. Messages and missed calls flooded her notifications, some from unknown numbers bearing extravagant praise, others from local journalists requesting interviews. One message, however, caught her eye more than the rest. Theo Marshall, a widely known music producer and one of the celebrity judges at the competition. She blinked in disbelief. Why would he personally message her? Heart thumping, she opened it. Lena, your performance was extraordinary. I'd love to discuss a project with you. Please call me at your earliest convenience. She sat there, stunned. Theo Marshall was rumored to have discovered multiple new talents who went on to dominate the music charts. And now he wanted to talk to her? She reread the text twice, making sure it wasn't a hoax. Eventually, she set the phone down, letting herself breathe. Her mother's words echoed in her head, never bury your voice. For the first time, Lena allowed herself to think, maybe I really do have something special. A shift in the mansion. When she finally mustered the courage to leave her small attic room, Lena found the Hawthorne mansion in an odd hush. Usually, by morning, the house bustled with staff ironing table linens or hauling out silver trays. This morning, they eyed her curiously, some giving shy nods or whispered congratulations. Word had traveled fast. Staff members who'd watched the show online recognized her transformation from invisible maid to mesmerizing performer. Down in the kitchen, the cook discreetly handed her a warm pastry. For the star, she joked, eyes kind. Lena blushed, murmuring her thanks. She wasn't used to such gestures, but a secret warmth sparked in her chest. Star, she repeated silently, still barely believing it. That warmth chilled the moment she stepped into the main foyer and found Juliet Hawthorne waiting for her, arms folded. Gone was the feigned sweetness of the previous day. Instead, her features pinched in barely suppressed anger. So, Juliet began, voice tight. Enjoy your little moment of fame, Lena? Lena swallowed. It went well, I think. Juliet's expression hardened. Indeed. The entire internet is buzzing about the maid who silenced a crowd. Quite the headline, isn't it? Her lips twisted into a mocking smile. You must be thrilled. Nervous energy coursed through Lena, but she held her ground. I'm surprised, mostly, she managed. I never expected people to react that way. Juliet scoffed, turning sharply. Clean the upstairs lounge today. There's a brunch tomorrow. Don't think your new status exempts you from doing your job. She strode off, high heels clicking on marble, leaving Lena with a hollow ache in her stomach. Viral sensation. Despite Juliet's spiteful glare, Lena's phone kept buzzing. The short clips of her performance, posted by random audience members and influencers, had already gone viral, racking up thousands, soon tens of thousands, of views in mere hours. Social media was aflame with hashtags like #MaidWithAMic and #VoiceFromNowhere. Even more surprising were the positive comments from strangers across the city, praising her courage and begging for more performances. At lunchtime, Lena holed up in a quiet corner of the staff break room, phone in hand. She finally mustered the nerve to call Theo Marshall. The line rang twice before a brisk, confident voice answered. Lena, he said warmly. I'm so glad you called. Congratulations on last night. You were sensational. Heat flushed her cheeks. Thank you, sir, she replied, instinctively reverting to polite subservience. I'm just a maid who got lucky, I guess. He chuckled. Luck? No, that was raw talent. Look, I won't take much of your time, but I'd love to meet in person, maybe tomorrow? I'm putting together a showcase for emerging artists. Your performance reminded me how thrilling it is to discover untapped potential. Her heart fluttered. A showcase? Yes, he confirmed. You'd perform 2 or 3 songs in front of industry pros, people who can help shape your future. I really think you'd shine. Lena's pulse pounded. I have responsibilities here at the mansion, she said hesitantly. Are they paying you enough to stifle your dream? He asked gently. The question hung in the air, too direct and too true. She thought about the daily grind, cleaning, dusting, all while being belittled by Juliet. And she thought about her mother's failing health in Lena's teenage years, how music once offered them both a lifeline. What if I can make it? She wondered. For the first time, the possibility felt tangible. I'll find a way, she heard herself say. Thank you so much. They ended the call, and Lena sat in stunned silence, phone still pressed to her ear. A swirl of excitement and dread battled inside her chest. She felt cornered by the mansion's constraints but also newly hopeful. Would Juliet even allow me a day off for this? She dreaded the fight that would likely ensue. Building tension. That evening, after finishing her chores, Lena gathered her courage and knocked on Juliet's private suite. The door swung open, revealing a room tastefully decorated with expensive modern art. Juliet sat on an ornate chaise, scrolling through her phone. She barely glanced up. "What now?" she asked in a clipped tone. Lena stepped forward, hands clasped. "I've been invited to a music showcase by Theo Marshall. It's tomorrow evening. May I?" Juliet cut her off, letting out an irritated laugh. "You just had your 15 minutes of fame, and now you want more? I told you to handle the upstairs lounge, not run off on some delusional spree. Do you think I'm going to rearrange my schedule so you can gallivant around, chasing stardom?" Her words stung, but Lena pressed on. "I'd only need a few hours off. I'll complete my tasks beforehand. This could be important for my future." Juliet's expression hardened further. "Your future? Don't forget you still work for my family. If you leave your duties undone, or skip them altogether, don't expect to keep your job." Her eyes flashed with bitterness. "Go if you want, but don't come crying to me if you lose your place here." Trembling, Lena nodded. She slipped out the door, a storm of worry in her chest. She couldn't afford to be unemployed. She still sent part of her wages to help her aging father. But the chance to step onto a real stage under a reputable producer's guidance was too precious to pass up. "I'll do both," she decided. "Work all day, attend the showcase at night, and hope the cost isn't too great." A hushed rehearsal. Late that night, Lena found herself once more in the music room. She turned on a small lamp by the piano. The rest of the mansion lay dark and quiet, yet her mind buzzed with possibility. Carefully, she selected a piece that blended her mother's classical influence with a modern twist, something that might captivate an audience at the showcase. She sang softly at first, mindful of the sleeping household. But with each line, her voice grew braver, stretching for the higher registers that once only existed in her mother's notes. She let the music fill the lonely corners of the room, that same space where she'd so often felt like a trespasser. Now, the air itself felt charged with hope. Finishing the piece, she opened her eyes to silence. A tear slid down her cheek, unbidden. The hush reminded her of that stadium moment. The instant laughter died and her voice took over. She realized that no matter how Juliet raged, no matter what chores awaited, she could never go back to the timid girl who hid her talent. Ripples of a frozen room. Morning arrived with a flurry of tasks. Lena worked tirelessly, scrubbing floors, polishing banisters, dusting the lounge's glass tables until they gleamed. By noon, she was lightheaded from skipping breakfast and lunch, but she refused to slow down. If she finished her duties to perfection, Juliet would have no excuse to withhold permission or to fire her. In the halls, staff members offered hushed congratulations whenever they passed. "Saw your clip online," one maid whispered, handing Lena a folded towel. "You were incredible." Lena blushed. "Thank you," she said quietly, touched by the genuine support. Yet as evening approached, an undercurrent of dread crept in. Would Juliet sabotage her at the last minute? Would she feign an emergency task to keep Lena chained to the mansion? The hours crawled by, tension coiling in her gut. Finally, at 5 o'clock, Lena changed from her uniform into a modest dress and slipped toward the front door. Her heart hammered. She half expected to see Juliet blocking her exit, wearing a triumphant sneer. But the foyer stood empty, the only sound being the steady tick of a grandfather clock. Stepping onto the mansion's grand porch, she inhaled the crisp twilight air. She was free, if only for tonight. Free to see if the hush her voice created on stage could happen again, this time for a more discerning crowd. In 7 seconds, she turned laughter into silence. The memory rang in her mind, fueling her determination. She descended the marble steps, each footfall echoing the next chapter of her unfolding life. Little did she know, in just a few hours, she would once again raise her voice before an audience, and this time, the hush that followed would be even more profound, echoing across social media, music circles, and beyond. A hush that would confirm, once and for all, that Lena Rivera was far more than just a maid in someone else's mansion. Through the tinted glass of the taxi window, Lena Rivera watched city lights flicker by like a trail of fallen stars. Her pulse hammered with equal parts hope and trepidation. She was en route to Theo Marshall's private industry showcase, a gathering of influential music producers, label representatives, and established artists. The mere thought made her palms sweat. She wasn't used to these circles. Yet here she was, stepping into an opportunity that might change her life forever. She clutched a simple tote bag containing sheet music and a tiny handheld mirror. Some of the other performers would bring stylists, managers, or entourages. Lena had only her well-worn notebook of songs, her mother's memory, and a voice that mere weeks ago was heard by no one. She prayed it would be enough. A gathering of influencers. At the venue, a chic, loft-style club in the Arts District, Lena hesitated at the entrance, momentarily blinded by flashing cameras. A wave of anxiety swept through her. Since that fateful night at the talent show, her face had begun appearing in viral videos across social media. Strangers praised her angelic tone and emotional authenticity, fueling a small but devoted following. Paparazzi, or at least local photographers, had caught wind of Theo's showcase. Now, they jostled outside, snapping pictures of each arriving guest. Gathering her courage, Lena slipped through the crowd. Inside, the atmosphere was charged, multicolored stage lights swept across the wide performance area, while an eager audience mingled around the tables, sipping drinks and chatting in excited tones. Theo himself stood near a small cluster of well-dressed executives, but upon catching sight of her, he excused himself and approached with a warm smile. "Glad you made it," he said, offering a handshake that turned into a friendly half-hug. "I've introduced you to a few folks already, actually." He gestured toward a refined woman in a tailored suit. "That's Miss Cunningham from Starburst Records. She's been dying to hear you live." Lena's heart fluttered. Starburst Records was one of the major labels she'd read about in magazines. I can't believe this is happening," she whispered. Theo chuckled. "Believe it? Now let's get you set up. You'll be performing second in the lineup tonight. 2 or 3 songs. Show them what I saw in you the other night." Her throat felt dry, but she nodded. She excused herself to a backstage corner, found a small chair, and began her usual warm-ups. Notes rose and fell softly, overshadowed by the buzz of conversation on the other side of the wall. Occasionally, another performer walked by, nodding politely. Most seemed too focused on their own sets to pay her much heed. Shadows of sabotage. Unbeknownst to Lena, forces outside the venue threatened her new opportunity. At the Hawthorne mansion, Juliet seethed with anger over Lena's rising profile. Headlines and viral clips lauded the maid with the golden voice, overshadowing Juliet's own social media presence. The last few days had been a nightmare of negative comments painting her as a petty villain who tried, and failed, to humiliate someone with genuine talent. She had retreated to her gilded suite, ignoring phone calls and quietly planning her next move. Scrolling through online chatter, she discovered a mention of Theo Marshall's upcoming showcase. Her eyes narrowed at a paparazzi snapshot capturing Lena stepping out of a taxi, stage-bound. So that was how it was. Lena, her family's maid, was apparently about to strut in front of music moguls, wearing a triumphant grin and forging a new life for herself. Rage twisted Juliet's stomach. "If she shines, I'll make sure everyone knows she's just a lowly housekeeper playing dress-up," she thought. "No one humiliates me and walks away unscathed." After a few quick phone calls to certain influencer friends, Juliet hatched a plan. If Lena's success was built on an underdog narrative, then maybe she could spread rumors that would turn admiration into scorn. That Lena was lying about her background, that she was an opportunist, that her singing was more auto-tuned than real. Gossip, if well-placed, could swirl like a storm, especially in an industry fueled by image. Smirking, Juliet typed her barbed messages, set them loose on social media, then waited for the damage to unfold. Taking the stage. Back at the showcase, Lena could feel her nerves intensify as Theo took the mic to introduce the evening's performers. The first act was a guitarist, smooth, confident, and well-received. Applause rippled across the loft. Lena swallowed hard, her stomach in knots. She tried to tune out the crowd's chatter, focusing instead on the hush in her own mind. "And now," Theo announced, his voice echoing in the venue, "I'm honored to present a discovery who proved that raw talent can shine in the most unexpected places. Please welcome Lena Rivera." A spotlight swept across the stage, landing on Lena. She inhaled sharply and stepped into its glow. The audience quieted, a few phones lifted to record. In the back, Miss Cunningham folded her arms, lips quirked in curiosity. The track began, gentle piano chords layering beneath a subtle string arrangement. Lena closed her eyes briefly, recalling the sensation of singing alone in the mansion's music room. She sang her first note, soft yet steady. A hush fell immediately, reminiscent of the crowd's abrupt shift from laughter to awe during her competition performance. This time, there was no mocking to overcome, but her emotions still ran high. She poured them into each lyric. During the chorus, her voice climbed, carrying a fragile mix of yearning and resolve. She saw tearful expressions in the front rows. Some people recorded intently, while others simply listened, transfixed. A flush of gratitude warmed her cheeks, urging her forward, strengthening her vibrato. By the second verse, she felt the invisible armor of the stage. Here, her voice mattered. She ended the song on a resonant note, letting it bloom until she exhaled softly. Silence reigned for a heartbeat, then applause thundered. She bowed, barely containing her wide smile. Miss Cunningham nodded with clear approval, and Theo grinned from ear to ear. "Encore, encore," someone called, and Lena graciously performed a second piece, a more upbeat track that showcased her range. The entire loft seemed electrified, clapping in rhythm as she soared through tricky runs. By the end, a small standing ovation greeted her final bow. Whispers in the crowd. After her set, Lena nearly staggered off stage, breathless from adrenaline. She was promptly ushered into a makeshift green room, where the chatter of industry folk buzzed around her. Ms. Cunningham approached first, extending a card. "You have a rare gift," she said, eyes bright. "Give me a call. We'd love to discuss possible label representation." Lena's fingers trembled. She managed a polite smile, pocketing the card. A swirl of producers and smaller label reps followed, each praising her voice, expressing interest in a meeting, or simply congratulating her for a marvelous performance. Overwhelmed, she nodded, thanked them, and tried to keep track of the many cards pressed into her hands. Yet in the midst of all the excitement, she caught fragments of hushed voices, glimpses of phone screens displaying hateful messages. She overheard someone murmuring, "I heard she's faking that humble background, and word online is that she's a manipulator." Confusion jolted her. Where is this coming from? A wiry journalist in large glasses sidled up. "Care to comment on the allegations that your story might be exaggerated for publicity?" he asked, phone raised to record. "Sources say you're not actually a maid, just an ambitious singer marketing herself as an underdog." Lena's stomach lurched. "I what? That's not true," she stammered. "I've worked as a maid at the Hawthorne mansion for 2 years." He shrugged, face unreadable. "Word travels fast. If you'd like to clear the air, now might be the time." He tilted his phone forward, expecting a statement. Her mind raced. She realized instantly this smelled of Juliet's handiwork. No one else would have reason to undermine her so specifically, or claim that she'd lied about working at the mansion. Swallowing her frustration, Lena lifted her chin. "It's not a marketing ploy," she said calmly, though her pulse hammered. "I've been a maid all this time, but I also have a passion for singing. That's all there is to it." The journalist nodded, not unfriendly but clearly intrigued by the drama. "Thanks for clarifying," he said, then slipped away to chase another scoop. Light outshines shadow. Thankfully, not everyone was swayed by these whispers. Theo, upon hearing about the rumors, scowled. "Industry gossip is as common as air," he told Lena. "The real question is whether you can deliver on stage, and you've already proven that you can." She took comfort in his unwavering confidence. Miss Cunningham, too, brushed off the negativity. A social media storm can blow over. Talent endures. She squeezed Lena's shoulder. If you need help handling this, our PR folks can advise you. Despite the attempted sabotage, the night ended on a triumphant note. The crowd's cheers spoke louder than any rumor. As Lena stepped outside to hail a taxi, a few supporters called her name, waving excitedly. She felt a bubble of hope and relief expanding within her chest. Even if Juliet's rumor mill continued, she had people in her corner now. Enemies in the shadows. At the mansion, Juliet scrolled through a wave of updates, fuming to see that Lena's performance had been a hit. True, some online chatter cast doubt on Lena's background, but it hadn't kneecapped her success as Juliet had hoped. In fact, some fans rallied around Lena, calling the rumors typical haters or jealous sabotage. The viral sympathy only grew, painting Lena as an even more innocent figure under attack. Hurling her phone onto a velvet cushion, Juliet paced her sweet, silent rage twisting her features. No matter what she tried, Lena's rising star glowed brighter, and with each surge in Lena's popularity, Juliet felt her own relevance slipping away. If gossip won't stop her, I'll have to find another way, she thought bitterly. A revelation of strength. For her part, Lena returned to the mansion just before midnight, exhausted and exhilarated in equal measure. She tiptoed past Juliet's suite, expecting at least a glare or a cutting remark, but the hallway was deserted. In her attic room, she set down her stack of business cards and collapsed onto the narrow bed. She gazed at the cracked ceiling, heart thrumming with the day's events. The world, it seemed, had found its new star, a shy maid who sang her soul out on stage. But that star now had enemies. Forces that once wanted her to shatter and still tried to push her off the path. Instead of fear, however, Lena felt a clear resolve. She was done hiding or letting others define her worth. She was done letting sabotage overshadow her mother's legacy. Before drifting off to sleep, she whispered a silent vow, "I won't let them break me." If the world wanted her voice, she would give it wholeheartedly, shining in the only way she knew how, honestly, humbly, and with all the passion that had once burned in secret each midnight. And in a quiet corner of that immense mansion, the final echoes of her vow lingered in the darkness, guiding her toward a destiny no one, not even Juliet, could steal. Lena Rivera stood in the mansion's grand foyer, shoulders tense as she clutched the polished brass doorknob. The echo of her footsteps lingered in the empty hall behind her, blending with faded memories of polishing floors at dawn and singing in secret after midnight. Tonight, though, was different. She wasn't returning from a day of labor. She was on her way out, armed with an invitation to the biggest performance of her life. The final clash. Since the showcase, Lena's life had spun like a whirlwind. Offer after offer arrived, some from small labels, others from prominent producers. Yet the most important invitation came from Ms. Cunningham at Starburst Records, a chance to perform at a well-publicized charity gala known for catapulting new talents into stardom. It was an event where the city's elite and media heavyweights converged. If Lena could stand out there, it might mean a record deal and a genuine start to her career. Juliet Hawthorne, predictably, despised every minute of Lena's rising profile. The more praise and interviews Lena received, the harder Juliet tried to discredit her, feigning that she was just a friend helping out a staff member, while telling her influencer circle to keep a skeptical eye on the maid who got lucky. Yet every attempt to stir controversy only fed the public's fascination with Lena's underdog story. In the days leading up to the gala, Lena balanced her usual housekeeping duties with frantic rehearsals. She often skipped meals, practicing until her throat felt raw. A few staff members, including the housekeeper Mrs. Hastings, quietly cheered her on. "Sing for us," Mrs. Hastings encouraged, pressing a warm scone into Lena's hand. "We'll be watching on TV." Even so, tensions ran high. Juliet threatened to overload Lena's schedule, dropping tasks on her at the last minute. Finally, on the morning of the gala, Lena mustered the courage to approach her in the drawing room, a lavish space lined with portraits of Hawthorne ancestors. "I've finished all assigned tasks, Miss Hawthorne," Lena said softly, squaring her shoulders. I'm leaving now for the charity gala. Juliet's gaze was ice-cold. Don't be late for tomorrow's duties, she snapped, barely looking up from her phone. If you are, don't bother coming back. We won't keep a lazy staff. A shiver rippled through Lena. She sensed this was a final ultimatum, one last attempt to hold her back. But as she stared at the gilded walls, so heavy with history and privilege, she realized she couldn't let fear chain her anymore. Understood, she whispered. Clutching her coat, Lena turned and walked out, each step echoing like a heartbeat that told her she was done living in the background. The gala's grandeur. The charity gala took place in the city's most opulent concert hall, a venue where marble columns soared, chandeliers sparkled, and rows of plush seats faced a stage draped in crimson velvet. Celebrities, socialites, and music moguls arrived in black tie attire, mingling over champagne. Lena stepped through the entrance in a borrowed gown, feeling more than a little self-conscious as she spotted paparazzi flashbulbs popping on every side. Theo Marshall appeared at her elbow, beaming. "You look amazing," he said, guiding her toward a backstage area. "Ms. Cunningham pulled some strings so you could headline the newcomer segment. This crowd is no joke, Lena. You ready?" Her stomach clenched. "As ready as I can be," she breathed. A quick run-through with the sound engineer followed, leaving her no time for second-guessing. She glanced around the backstage wings. Performers in designer outfits chattered excitedly, stagehands rushed with last-minute cues. Unlike at the earlier showcase, there was no illusions of ease. This was big. The nerves threatened to overpower her, but she closed her eyes and thought of her mother. Never bury your voice. Stepping into the spotlight. The MC's polished tone reverberated. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a special treat tonight, an emerging artist whose story has captured hearts all over social media. Please welcome Lena Rivera." Applause spattered across the grand hall as Lena moved toward the microphone. Her borrowed gown rustled against her feet, each step a reminder that she had once navigated these same motions carrying cleaning supplies, dreaming of a moment just like this. The stage lights blazed down, momentarily blinding her, but she found the center mark, inhaled slowly, and let the hush envelop her. The music started, a gentle piano progression that transitioned into a sweeping orchestral arrangement. Lena raised the mic, voice trembling at first, then gaining strength as she sang about hope and resilience. Every lyric echoed her own journey, every note pulled from nights spent singing in secret corners, from tears over the dusting rag, from a burning desire to honor her mother's gift. At first, the crowd listened politely. But by the second verse, an awed hush drifted through the hall. Phones lowered as people realized she wasn't just a novelty, she was a force. Her voice soared, blending raw emotion with practiced control, the kind only heartbreak and perseverance could forge. In that instant, laughter died, conversations ceased, and the grand auditorium seemed to shrink to just her and the music. It was the hush she had felt that first time on stage, multiplied tenfold. The voice that froze the room. Even the well-to-do donors in their box seats leaned forward, rapt. When the final note faded, Lena exhaled shakily. The applause crashed like a wave, rolling through the hall in thunderous unison. Dozens stood, then hundreds, their cheers resonating off gilded walls. At the edge of the stage, Miss Cunningham dabbed at her eyes, while Theo pumped his fist in triumph, unveiling the star. After her performance, Lena was whisked into a flurry of congratulatory handshakes, business card exchanges, and camera flashes. One reporter shoved a microphone forward, exclaiming, "Lena, can you tell us how it feels to go from Maid to main stage in such a short time?" She paused, a swirl of gratitude and disbelief making her lightheaded. "I'm still trying to process it," she said, voice trembling with emotion. "All I ever wanted was to sing. I've been a maid, yes, but singing was my dream, my mother's dream. I'm humbled by tonight's reception." As the reporter relayed more questions, Miss Cunningham gently steered Lena toward a quieter corner, introducing her to top record executives. They discussed potential deals, upcoming auditions for major televised events, and how to shape her first official album. Lena could scarcely believe the conversation. Words like, branding, and tour dates floated around her, surreal and thrilling in the same breath. A quiet goodbye. When the gala ended, Lena found herself outside under a broad colonnade. Night air brushed her cheeks as black limousines whisked guests away. She clutched her phone, noticing dozens of missed messages, some from fans, some from supporters at the mansion, and a single terse text from Juliet. "If you're not here by sunrise, don't bother showing up." A pang hit her heart. She had known this confrontation was coming. She might have to relinquish the security of her housekeeping job. But after tonight's reception, was there any question of her next step? A black sedan glided to a stop. Miss Cunningham rolled down the window. "We're heading to an after-party," she said with a knowing smile. "But I have a feeling you might need some rest. Take your time. Call me in the morning. We have details to discuss." Lena nodded, murmuring thanks. As the car pulled away, she gazed at her reflection in the polished marble columns. She no longer saw the timid maid who once dusted these kinds of upscale gatherings unseen. She saw an artist, someone whose voice had broken open locked doors. From maid to main stage. By dawn, Lena had already packed her modest belongings from the attic room at the Hawthorne mansion. She left a heartfelt note for Mrs. Hastings and the few staff members who'd supported her. No more cleaning floors for scraps of praise, no more tiptoeing around Juliet's manipulations. Standing in the mirror near the front entrance, she recalled how she once glimpsed only a servant's silhouette. Now, she recognized a star in the making, someone who had survived mockery, harnessed heartbreak, and discovered that a single determined voice could captivate the world. Suitcase in hand, Lena pushed the door open to meet the rising sun. She slipped onto the gravel driveway, where a car waited to take her into the city. The final chord of her old life resonated behind her as she left. She might have walked in through the back door of show business, nothing more than a maid with a dream, but she was leaving through the front door, stepping fully into the spotlight she had once believed was out of reach. The journey ahead was uncertain, its path lit by the spark she carried in her heart. But as she settled into the car, feeling dawn's rays on her face, she realized there was no going back. She was Lena Rivera, the maid-turned-star, ready to embrace a future she'd once only dared to sing about in the quiet shadows of a sleeping mansion. And this time, when she sang, the whole world would listen. The end. If you enjoyed this story, we invite you to give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Your support motivates us to keep bringing heartwarming stories almost every day. We are very grateful for your support. See you soon.